Hello, everybody. Welcome to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, October 25th. We have a big show for you every Friday. As always, we get into our NFL and college football game picks. But before we get into that, we're going to do the recap of a Thursday night football game that saw the Vikings lose their second straight. The Rams finally get healthy and get a win, and an absolute thrashing that Pitt put on Syracuse, a crucial game when looking at the future for the ACC and the college football playoff. But before we get into all of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, October 25th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we are going to start off our show with a Thursday night football recap. The Los Angeles Rams hosted the one-loss Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings coming off the first loss of their season, a brutal loss that they got walked off on by the Detroit Lions just this Sunday. A quick turnaround for both of these teams that saw the Rams win a massive game for them. Now they are just barely out of a playoff spot, within scratching distance of the Seattle Seahawks at the top of the division, only sitting in second place despite starting at 1-4. Now, currently sitting at 3-4. They are very, very much in the playoff race for the NFC West. It was a massive, massive win for them. As far as the Vikings go, we're going to start with them because my biggest takeaway came with the Rams. As far as from the Vikings side, there were a lot of mistakes here. They lose Christian Darrisaw just before halftime. He is now out for the rest of the season. They are getting a little bit of reinforcements back to kind of replace him in TJ Hawkinson, their tight end, now coming off of IR, supposedly going to start his season for his first game of the season coming up next week. That would be a huge addition for them. We see how the Vikings like to use their tight ends already. Sam Darnold didn't have his best game, and we saw that especially when he was under pressure from Jared Verse and this Rams defensive line, a Rams defense that is playing way above expectations that we had for them heading into the beginning of this season. When we're talking about this Rams team, we were talking about an offensive firepower team, one with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua finally being together on the same field with both of their versatile skill sets. Matthew Stafford obviously being one of the better quarterbacks in the league, and Kyren Williams being a touchdown machine. Not too much attention was paid to that defense, especially after the loss of one of the greatest defenders of all time in Aaron Donald. Now, obviously, the Rams season started off slow. Slow might be an understatement there. It started off in a disaster. You lose both of your wide receivers within the first 2 weeks of the season. The offensive line was already horribly banged up, not to mention the defense. But now, as we start to get further and further into this season, they get healthier. And as we've seen that the last couple of weeks, they've continued to get better. They've now won 2 straight games, including a win against one of these contending teams in the Vikings in this matchup. 20-30, obviously a controversial call at the end of the game, kind of puts it in the favor of the Rams with that safety. Should have been a face mask, although really in reality, I don't think that would have changed things too much. They get the ball at the 15-yard line, first down, and they still need to drive the length of the field and get a 2-point conversion. I just didn't see the Vikings offense quite getting that done with no timeouts and a minute 50 to go in the game. So I don't think that really had too much of an effect on it. Obviously, should have been called. Sucks that it wasn't. But really, I don't understand why people think that one play would have changed the outcome of the game. They still would have had to driven 90, 85 yards down the field. So that's my thoughts on that call. But turning my attention back to the Rams here, The Rams, we saw today, finally got healthy last night. We saw what that Rams team can be. Like I said, that defense is playing out of its mind right now. They did it finally against a good team. We saw them do it against the Raiders last week, putting up a defensive masterclass. Now, again, it's the Raiders, so that doesn't mean much. But doing against the Vikings does mean a lot. Once they settled in, once Sam Darnold, after he started off really hot, 9 for 9 to begin the game, Christian Darrisaw went down. They were able to get pressure, and then the Vikings just were out of sorts for the rest of the game. This was a really, really well-coached game by two really good coaches. Both of these teams made their share of mistakes, but they were able to get past it. And in the Rams' case, again, we finally see how good this team can be when they were healthy. There was lots of talk about Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford I even saw, Puka Nacua getting traded away. And I've said it a whole bunch of times on this show already. It never made any sense to me. It never did. This is a Rams team that is in the middle of a contending window. You can try and say that they're not, but as long as Matthew Stafford is there as their quarterback, they're in a contending window because they finally had a first-round draft pick for the first time this year in forever, in almost 10 years, since Jared Goff was picked. That was their last first-round pick. Since then, they've given it all up to win that Super Bowl that they won the year they got Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford is 36 years old. He is playing still really, really good football. We saw him do some stuff a 36-year-old should not be able to do, dipping and diving under and over tacklers to escape a sack and then find Cooper Kupp in the end zone for the second touchdown of the game. He threw 4 touchdowns last night. He had a near perfect game, aside from one ball that was badly overthrown. Matthew Stafford still is at the peak of his powers here, and if you think the Rams are a team that should be trading, should be selling, I have never understood that. I never understood the reason for it. This is a team that their championship window, at least their playoff window, is open as long as Matthew Stafford is there, and we see how good this team can be when they are healthy. That is what this game showed. This is a Rams team with fight, and especially in a division that is as up for grabs as the NFC West is, they should never be in these conversations to sell. And I think after last night's game, that is going to go away, and we are going to see more of, hey, can the Rams make the playoffs? It's a fickle league over here. People want to have those discussions. I just don't know why the Rams were even seriously considering that, if I'm being honest. But anyway, that was a great game. Lots of momentum. The Vikings lose their second straight, and that sucks. I think we're starting to see the weaknesses of this Vikings team. As good as Sam Darnold has played, he's not the quarterback that's going to go out there and win you these games constantly, right? It's been, for the Lions game, it was the defense that put them ahead. Ivan Pace with a scoop and score to put them ahead in the waning moments of the game before the Lions went over and kicked that game-winning field goal. In this one, the defense wasn't able to shut them down. You can call penalties or not. You can blame the refs. A lot of people were very angry about that. But Sam Darnold was unable to push the ball down the field when he needed to. And that's not to say he played bad. He played a good game. But when you look at Sam Darnold, you aren't expecting him to make these game-winning drives. He's not a guy that you expect to rely on. I think this is a Vikings team that can make the playoffs, can make a deep run in the playoffs with the way that their defense is playing. But if they have to rely on Sam Darnold the way that they did in this game, the way that they have been these last couple weeks, I don't think it's going to be a deep run in the playoffs like a lot of people were thinking. The Vikings are still a very good team, but this one definitely stings for them. They actually fall to near the bottom of their division after 2 straight losses. We'll see what happens with the rest of that division, but they still are firmly in a playoff spot right now. So we will see what happens down the stretch for both of these teams. They both are, I think, in very similar spots. I think they're both going to be wild card teams that could be dangerous for a division winner in the playoffs. But let me know what you think. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to college football from last night. 2 massive games with implications in their own conferences, a massive ACC matchup with a ranked team, and a Sun Belt battle that totally flips the way that we're looking at the Sun Belt East for now. So make sure you stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows or 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, October 25th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the Thursday night football game between the Rams and the Vikings that saw the Vikings lose their second straight game, 30-20, this time to the Rams. The Rams finally healthy. Talked all about that. In this segment, we turn our attention to the other football action from last night. There were two massive, important games in both the ACC and the Sun Belt Conference that took place in college football yesterday. We will break both of those down based on their results. Talk about those in just a second, but before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. Appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, October 25th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we're going to finish off our review from last night before we get into game picks for this weekend, talking about the college football action. We're going to start off with the ranked matchup as number 19 Pitt dominated Syracuse in a game where Kyle McCord, transfer quarterback from Ohio State, put up one of the worst performances that I have seen. That Pitt defense really did everything they needed to in a game where Kyle McCord threw the ball 62 times. 5 of them were intercepted, and of those 5, 3 of them were returned for a touchdown. All 3 in the first half, 2 of them taking place in the first quarter. That was just an absolute manhandling of Syracuse by Pitt. That was a game that I honestly thought Pitt was going to lose. Pitt continues to be undefeated now, 7-0, and this is by far their most impressive victory. Syracuse is a team that I didn't think was getting enough respect. If you looked at my personal rankings, they were sitting down there at number 21 for me. Pitt was slightly behind them, sitting at number 22. So they were ranked right next to each other on my personal rankings here. I thought this was going to be must-watch television here. Turns out Pitt's defense especially came out. I thought this would be an offensive battle. Syracuse is a very physical football team. And when they can't go out there, when they start off as poorly as they did with 2 pick sixes in the first half, they have to turn to the pass game. And we've seen in a game where you have to rely on Kyle McCord, 35 for 64. He did throw for 300 yards, but those 5 interceptions absolutely killed them. They were barely able to run the ball, which has been their bread and butter. Their physical receivers weren't able to out-physical this Pitt team that is looking more and more impressive and is starting to amass quite the resume. Like I said, they're one of the final undefeated teams this season. They were able to make a massive comeback earlier this year against Cincinnati, a team that's almost bowl eligible already and has looked really, really good, especially last week against a team like like Arizona State that had a lot of momentum coming in. They were able to withstand a West Virginia team that has pushed a lot of good teams to the brink. They destroyed North Carolina, beat Pitt, and they just beat Syracuse. They are in a position in the ACC right now where they have a real shot of making that championship game. If they are able to make it through a couple of their big matchups coming up, SMU versus SMU coming up next week, for example, then they have Clemson and Louisville to wrap out their season. If they can beat Clemson, I think, and of course run the table there. If they run the table, they're basically set for a ACC title. In fact, they are. They play both SMU and Clemson. If they run the table here, the only team that is undefeated in conference right now that they don't play is Miami. So if they take care of business, they've secured a spot in the ACC championship. And I think this year, as we've seen the ACC, especially the top of the ACC, continue to play really good football, I think this is a situation where both of the ACC title play games, both teams in the ACC title game will make it to the college football playoff. This Pitt team has surprised me. They should get a big boost this week. That defense played awesome. Usually they rely on their offense in Eli Holstein and, like I said, and that offense, but they didn't need it today. They played a really complete game against a really good Syracuse team. This is a huge win for that Pitt program. The other game that took place last night was a Sun Belt Conference matchup. Not the biggest clash, but Old Dominion taking on Georgia Southern, a Georgia Southern team that looked like it had a vice grip on the Sun Belt East after taking down James Madison last week. If they took down ODU, I don't think there was another team in their path that would have stopped them from making it to the Sun Belt Championship. But now they have a tie. They're in second place now after that. They don't have the tiebreaker anymore to ODU after getting absolutely dismantled 47-19. This is a team that in Georgia Southern, that's only losses prior had come against SEC opponent Ole Miss and, of course, Group of 5 playoff favorite Boise State. These are both really, really good teams. And then, of course, they had just beaten James Madison the other day. Not a great James Madison game, but still, they had come out there, they did what they needed to do, and they look like a lock to advance to the Sun Belt Championship at least. Then ODU comes in, a team that started 0-3 on the year, now getting back to 4-4, looked like a real problem in the Sun Belt. We've only got a couple games left, but the Sun Belt East has really been a crapshoot right now. And right now, if ODU continues to play the way that they have since Sun Belt play started, really, outside of the Coastal Carolina game, even in that Coastal Carolina game when they lost 37-45, we saw the idea that offense could have. If ODU continues to play like this, Old Dominion could be a Sun Belt Conference Finals team. They could make a little bit of a run. ODU did not have a lot of expectations. Like I said, they started off 0-3 on the season before winning now 4 out of their last 5. So an awesome turnaround for this team. We will see. This was a great day of college football on a small Thursday slate, but both of these games having huge implications for the playoff, especially in the ACC. Pitt deserves a lot more respect. That really, I think, just about eliminates Syracuse, unfortunately. They were having a really nice season, but I think they'll be able to turn it around. Kyle McCord's still a very young quarterback. Not sure if he'll still be there. Maybe he hits the transfer portal, but this is a team that I think really blew a lot of expectations out of the water this season. They should make a bowl game at the least. It should be a solid bowl game. So we will see what happens to the rest of these teams. But we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we start our game picks. We're going to stay in college football for now, go over these games that I think mean a lot. I picked out 19 games from a stacked slate this week in college football. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, October 25th. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the Thursday night action in college football with ODU getting a massive win and Pitt absolutely destroying Syracuse with 3 pick sixes in the first half. A massive game for the Panthers to show they really are deserving of being in the top 20 right now. In this segment, we start off our game picks. We start off in the ranks of college football. We'll get to the NFL in our next segment. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, October 25th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we turn our attention to game picks. Starting off in college football, really a big week 9. Lots of big games taking place this week. Not as massive as a Georgia-Texas last week, but we have a litany of ranked matchups. Should be a lot of fun. We're going to start off with all 3 of the Friday games. Should be good tonight. Rutgers taking on USC. Rutgers coming off of an embarrassing loss against Wisconsin last week. They got absolutely blown out. That's 2 straight losses for the Scarlet Knights, who started off as a team that might have been near the top 25 just 2 weeks ago. Now they've all but been eliminated. This is a game that is must win for both of these teams. USC falling out of the top 25 a couple weeks ago have suffered a couple brutal losses in a row. Penn State, they nearly beat in overtime. They almost beat Michigan. They're just not quite there. A lot of one-score games for this team. USC favored by 14 in this one. As bad as both of these teams have been playing. And it really is a shame because both of these teams, I think, are very similar. This is in California, and I think that plays a huge role. Having to travel cross-country is something that we often don't think about, especially for college kids and football players that don't have to do that often. I'm taking USC to win this one. 14 is a lot of points, though. I think the way that these two teams played, it's going to be a lot more of a slugfest. USC wins 27-20. The second of 3 Friday games tonight as the Louisville Cardinals, favored by 7.5 points, travel up to Boston to take on Boston College. Boston College, a team that started off hot, obviously winning a game against then top 10 ranked Florida State. We now see that win has not aged very well, and neither has this Boston College team. They've had a couple of moments. They keep it close against some solid opponents, but they have been unable to take advantage of a lot of them. Louisville has lost now 3 straight games, 1 to Notre Dame, 1 to SMU, obviously the 1 to Miami. All of them have been shootouts, and that's the way that this game is going to go. Louisville's offense is as potent as anybody else's in the entire country. You want to talk about one of the more firepower games that we've seen all year, you go watch that Miami-Louisville game that took place last week. Fireworks, like we were talking about when we were doing these predictions last week. Louisville favored by 7.5 in this one. Like I said, that offense is really good. I don't think Boston College quite has the same kind of track record as these teams that have beaten Louisville. All the teams that Louisville has lost to are now ranked in the top 25. SMU, the lowest ranked one, they get a massive game this week that we'll get to later. They're number 22. Notre Dame all the way up at number 12, and of course Miami ranked in the top 6 in the country. These are all really quality losses that they have stayed competitive in. Louisville should blow Boston College out of the water, but Boston College has the ability to hang around, especially with the way that the Louisville defense has been playing recently, have not really been able to stop much of anything. I think Louisville wins, though, 37-28. And then the final Friday game. I think, in all honesty, this is one of the biggest games of the entire season, not just of the week, as number 17 Boise State hosts UNLV. In all reality, this is most likely a battle to see who gets that spot, that group of 5 spot in the college football playoffs. These two teams have been at the top of my group of 5, top 5, for quite some time now. Boise State coming off of a bye, UNLV with a big win these last couple of weeks. They always play these games on Thursday and Friday, so they have a big audience a lot of times. This game, the biggest one that either of these teams have played. I think Boise State, who's favored by 3.5 on this one, is going to be able to just squeeze by. This should be a lot of fun. This is much-watch television tonight. Boise State, again, favored by 3.5. I think they squeak by on this one, 31-27. Heading on to Saturday's slate. Number 4, Ohio State, off of a bye, losing to Oregon their last time out in a tight game, losing only by 1, favored by 25, taking on Nebraska at home. Nebraska coming off of a brutal loss against Indiana. Indiana just beating them by 40 points in this one. It was never really close. That offense has its struggles, and if they can't put up points against an Indiana team that, while it's been really, really good, is nothing compared to Ohio State defensively, they aren't going to be able to put too many points up against Ohio State. I think this game goes very similar to the way it went last week. I think Ohio State wins 44-14. Then we get our first ranked matchup of the week as number 12 Notre Dame takes on number 24 Navy. Notre Dame favored by 12.5 in this one. Again, crazy that all of these service academies are ranked, but this is a big test for Notre Dame. Notre Dame obviously is one that has been known to get upset by group of 5 schools. It's already happened once this season when they lost to NIU, and that is something that should be held against them. But Notre Dame has played their best football of the season out of that loss. They haven't really played a bad game since, but if anyone is going to give them a fight out of anyone that they've played so far, it's going to be Navy. We saw them beat up on Louisville. Louisville doesn't really have a defense, but Navy has been dominating everybody that they see. This is the biggest test of the season for them. This is going to really show if these service academies are just beating up on lesser opponents or if they really truly deserve to hang with the big boys this season. I think Notre Dame takes this one. The way that their offense has been rolling, I just don't see Navy having the ability to keep up with them or really slow them down all too much offensively. I think 12.5 points is a lot, though, so I think they're going to keep that close. 33-22. Notre Dame wins this game. Then we get an Indiana team that I was just talking about, ranked in the top 15 for maybe the first time ever. They have the option. This is their best season since the 1970s for Indiana here. They have the ability to go 11-1 on the season if they can get past Washington. Their quarterback Curtis Rourke is hurt. That definitely hurts a lot in this one. But Indiana is one of 2 teams all season that is yet to trail at all. Curt Cignetti, a very good head coach, wins everywhere he goes, but he is prone to losing one big game that they're expected to win a year. This kind of feels like that trap game, if only because Ohio State is up next. Game day is coming to town. and they don't have their quarterback. I don't know if that's going to happen because this is a Washington team that has very clear weaknesses. They were beaten by a bunch of teams that I think Indiana would blow out of the water, so I don't think this is the one they lose, but it has upset written all over it. I'm a little cautious about this one. This is a little bit on upset alert, but I'm picking Indiana to win anyway. They win 34-18. Oklahoma travels to number 18 Ole Miss, and this is an elimination game for Ole Miss. And for all intents and purposes, I think Oklahoma has already been eliminated this season. Ole Miss is hanging on by a thread. The way that the SEC is going, with a battle between the only two undefeated teams in the SEC in LSU and Texas A&M happening this week as well. We'll talk about that later. This is a huge game for Ole Miss. Obviously, this is a game that they need to win if they want to stay alive. Oklahoma's not going to make that easy. I think Oklahoma's defense is still very good. They need to figure out their offense. They're going back to Jackson Arnold this week. I don't think it's going to be quite enough. I think Ole Miss takes this one in a tight one. Ole Miss favored by 20. I think that's way too many points. Ole Miss is a team that can get pushed around, and if Oklahoma has the physicality to do that, I don't think they're going to be able to win. No, Ole Miss wins 31-20. Coming back to the ACC for a big matchup of teams that are just outside of that contending for the ACC bubble, as Georgia Tech travels to Virginia Tech to take on the Hokies. The Hokies have been really good since the conference schedule started, almost taking down Miami, beating everybody else in the conference, currently sitting tied for second in that conference right now. They have a weird path in. They can still find a way in. They got Clemson coming up on the schedule. If they're able to win out, it's conceivable that they find a way to get back to the top of the ACC. The ACC top is a jumble right now. I think Virginia Tech is just playing better football right now than Georgia Tech, but still, Georgia Tech has kept every game they've played close. The ability to run the ball with their quarterback and their running back has been nearly unmatched all season. I think Virginia Tech is able to hold off, but it's going to be closer than that 10.5 point spread. Georgia Tech loses 30-24. Heading to Big Ten country up next, another ranked matchup as number 20 Illinois, a team that is continuing to show that they deserve real consideration in the Big Ten, takes on the number 1 team in the nation, the Oregon Ducks. Oregon favored by 22.5, and they have really hit their stride in recent weeks. Oregon, obviously coming off of 2 weeks ago, coming off of one of the biggest wins in the country all season long, taking down Ohio State by just a point. They continued rolling, winning big last week against Purdue. Not the biggest opponent, but still, they didn't have that classic fall-off game that a lot of teams have, shown these last couple of weeks. Alabama losing to Vandy, stuff like that. Oregon favored by 2.5, 22.5 in this one. That is a lot of points for an Illinois team that has continued to show that they're better than expected. I don't think they win this one because, like I said, Oregon, one of the deepest teams in all of college football, one of the most complete teams in all of college football, is hitting their stride. But I think 22.5 is really disrespectful, honestly, to Illinois. I think they cover that pretty easily, but I still think Oregon their offense puts up too much points for Illinois to keep up with. They win 40-23. Then a game that I just flat out don't understand. UCF is favored against number 11 BYU. I know BYU is very lucky with turnovers. They kind of had a close one last week, but still, UCF has gotten blown out by a Colorado team that, while Colorado's awesome, BYU is still better than them. BYU, again, winning is a skill. I don't understand in what world UCF is favored, even though they're at home. BYU should win this one pretty handily. I love the way their defense plays. Their offense hasn't really been able to be slowed down by anybody all season long. Kansas State is maybe the best team in the Big 12, and BYU was able to handle them pretty easily. I think BYU goes down to Florida, takes out UCF pretty easily. I don't know why UCF is favored. BYU wins 31-21. Another ranked matchup this week, and this one really is an elimination game. I know I talked about elimination games earlier, but this is an elimination game for both of these teams, as Missouri, the number 21 team in the nation, takes on number 15 Alabama. Alabama coming off their second loss of the season. They just can't win in the state of Tennessee right now. This is a massive game. Alabama's favored by 17.5, and I think that sounds about right. Alabama is a team that just absolutely is better than Missouri. Missouri has played good, but they haven't been able to dominate anyone. The last time we saw them play a matchup similar to this was against Texas A&M, and they got absolutely blown out of the water by Texas A&M, giving up 40 points in that matchup. Alabama is not the Alabama of old. They've been struggling. They haven't been able to play consistently good football, especially on offense. Jalen Milroe has been too turnover happy this season, especially after the big win against Georgia. They need to find a way to calm down. This should be a get-right game for Alabama. 17.5 points is a lot. I think they win. I'm pretty confident they win this game by a lot, but 17.5 is so many points. I think the final score, Alabama 31, Missouri 14, again, in an elimination game for the playoffs. I don't know how much this does for Alabama, but I don't think Missouri is going to be able to hang with them. Excuse me. Continuing with a in-state Texas matchup as Texas Tech takes on TCU. Texas Tech coming off of a brutal loss to Baylor last week. Texas Tech was getting some buzz as a fringe top 25 team. Looking at some of their resumes, some people were putting them in the top 25. Then they take a brutal loss there to Baylor. People stop talking about them. I don't think this makes them a bad team. They slipped up. They didn't play very good football. I think this is a game where they're going to be like, hey, we're still here. Respect us. I think Texas Tech comes back, wins this game. They're currently favored. They're actually underdogs in this one. TCU favored by 6.5. I think Texas Tech takes this one 31-28. Yet another ranked matchup still in the SEC as number 5 Texas travels to Vanderbilt to take the number 25 Commodores. It's crazy that Vanderbilt is ranked after not the greatest performance against Ball State. I understand ranking them after Alabama, but still, this is now a ranked matchup. Texas obviously coming off of that brutal loss to Georgia where they just looked awful in almost every phase of the game. The defense stepped up, played solid, was able to pick off Carson Beck a couple of times, but still the offense was not able to get anything going against a solid Georgia defense. I don't think Vandy's defense is anywhere near as good as that Georgia defense is going to cause a lot of issues for this team. We take a look at that Vanderbilt offense led by Diego Pavia. It's a good offense. They were able to put up nearly 40 on Alabama, a team that beat Georgia. Georgia beat Texas. You can play that game. I'm pretty sure you get the full circle at this point, especially with the chaos that's been going on this year. But still, this has been a wild year in the SEC, especially, and I can't get out of my head that Vanderbilt has a chance. Texas is favored by 18 points in this one. That is way too many points. I don't know if they're going to lose, but I think this is a game where they get right and they say we cannot lose 2 in a row. Texas wins 38-30. West Virginia, a team that is fine, has taken a couple of tough losses this season, travels to Arizona to take on the Wildcats. Arizona favored by 4.5, and Arizona just has not been a good team this year. Whatever happened to that elite offense at the end of last year has completely disappeared. That defense continues to just be a hole in the wall right there. You can just find your way through. This is a solid West Virginia team. If you give them the ability to come in and win the game, they are going to take that from you as long as they keep it clean, and I don't think Arizona is very good at forcing turnovers in this one. This one should be a tight game, but I think West Virginia wins 26-24. Couple more matchups here. A massive Big Ten game as number 3 Penn State. think they're ranked way too high here, travels to Wisconsin. Camp Randall. Wisconsin's been playing awesome football right now. They come off of a great outing against Rutgers, putting up 42 points. Not quite the same level of matchup, but still, this is a really good Wisconsin team, especially the way they've been playing the last couple of weeks, and a Penn State that feels like they're limping in here after coming off a bye, after suffering a near loss to USC. Wisconsin is a team that I think is going to cause a lot of trouble. I think they upset Penn State in this one. I'm not a big Penn State fan this year. I don't like the product they've been putting out on the field. Excuse me. I think Penn State falls for the first time this season. They lose 33-28. Then a battle for the top of the SEC. I previewed it a little bit earlier as number 8 LSU travels to number 14 Texas A&M. Both of these teams, the only undefeated squads in SEC conference play. They both have losses in week 1, but they're both playing really good football. We saw the offense for Texas A&M start to heat up when they brought in a different quarterback. We saw the LSU defense continue to play really good, and Garrett Nussmeier, when he's on, looks like a true NFL starting quarterback. Not sure if he's really going to be consistent enough this year, but maybe next year, if he stays in college one more year, he can go in the first round. This is going to be a really, really fun game. I think in this one, since it is in Texas A&M, I'm leaning towards the Aggies. It should basically a pick'em. Right now, Texas A&M favored by 1 point, so it is a pick'em, and I think that's exactly what we're going with. I'm picking Texas A&M to win this game 28-27. 3 more games to go as an in-state Kansas rivalry, or not really in-state here, but Kansas travels to number 16 Kansas State to take on the Wildcats over there, potentially the best team in the Big 12. They've been playing better and better every single week. They just came off of a big win last week over Colorado. This is a huge game for them. Over West Virginia. They beat Colorado 2 weeks ago. Kansas State continues to play better and better football. Avery Johnson especially, I've been really impressed by. Kansas State takes this one pretty easily, 34-17. Then SMU. They also have a path to the college football playoff. They basically win and you're in kind of situation in the SEC. We talked about that in our last segment. We were talking about Pitt. They're the number 22 in the nation, traveling to Duke, who suffered their first loss of the season just a little bit ago. I think SMU dominates this game. Their offense is one of the best in the country, and their defense has been able to slow down Louisville, who is one of the best offenses in the country. I think SMU wins pretty easily, 31-17. And the final game I wanted to touch on this week, as Cincinnati travels to Colorado in a game that both of these teams are near the top 25. Right now, Colorado, as crazy as it sounds, I don't think is getting enough respect. Their defense is playing really good, especially on the defensive line. Cincinnati has had their one loss in a choke job against a now undefeated Pitt team that's going to be ranked in the top 15 after what they did this week, most likely. That is a good quality loss. Both of these teams are going to get really good bowl games, and it should be a lot of fun in this one. High-scoring, high-flying offenses for both of these. I think Colorado ekes it out 30-27. But let me know what you think. Love to hear your thoughts on any of these games. We're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we turn our attention to Week 8 in the NFL, go over all of the games. There is not a single bye week this week. We'll go over all 15 games, including the Monday night one. So stick around for that. We'll be right back here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. Welcome back to Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Friday, October 25th. If you are just tuning in, we just went over our Week 9 college football game picks, went over 19 of the biggest matchups this week, and really what is a stacked slate of football, not one that was expected at the beginning of the year, but is turning into an excellent week of football. In this segment, we turn our attention to the pros, the NFL. Week 8 is upon us already. I cannot believe we're already almost halfway through this season. We're going to break down every single game, give you a final score prediction in just 1 second. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to GSMCPodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Friday, October 25th. But like I was saying, in this segment, we're going to finish off our show today talking all about the NFL slate. A really good slate this week, not quite as good as last week with 3 of the best games you could possibly have on paper back to back to back. But we still have a lot of really good games, high-profile games this week, starting off in New England, with the Patriots hosting the New York Jets, a game that the Jets need in the worst possible way. The Jets coming off of really an ugly game, both by the whole team and Aaron Rodgers. They're getting Hassan Reddick back for the first time, favored by 7. The last win that this team had was against the Patriots all the way back in week 3 or 4, I believe. This is a massive game for them. They need this, again, in the worst. It's been a must-win for the Jets just about every single week for about the last 4 or 5 weeks since they went to Minnesota. They have lost every single one of them. They have made desperation move after desperation move. They are out of desperation moves. They need to show some results right now. I don't know how good this team is, but I do know that they are better than the Patriots. I think it's going to go very similarly to last time they played, although with Drake May in the equation now, it could look a little different as they might have those explosive plays downfield available to them. I still think the Jets take care of business with Hassan Reddick coming in. He should be able to apply pressure off the edge in a way that they haven't had all season. The Jets win 31-14. We travel to Cincinnati next, as the Eagles, coming off of 2 straight wins against 2 pretty bad teams in the Browns and the Giants, travel to Cincinnati to take on Joe Burrow and the Bengals, also coming off of wins against the same exact team. Both of these teams coming in a very similar spot. The Bengals need this to stay in line for the playoffs. The Eagles are doing better than you would think for where they stand right now. This is going to be maybe one of the better games of the week. Philadelphia and Cincinnati, both on 2-game win streaks, both against the same opponents. Neither of them looked super dominant against either of them, so we're really going to see which one of these teams has the better wins. I think it's going to come down to their defenses, really. Cincinnati's defense has been playing a lot better recently, but we saw that Eagles front 4 get 8 sacks last week against the Giants. Well aware it's against the Giants and a very bad offensive line, but there was a lot of optimism coming out of Philly and Cincinnati right now. One of those teams are going to be let down pretty hard. I'm leaning towards Philly in this one. I think Saquon's going to be able to provide the difference. I think they win 28-24. The Green Bay Packers travel to Jacksonville to take on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trevor Lawrence and the Jags back in America after 2 weeks abroad in London. They went 1-1 over there. Their coach didn't get fired. He's on the hot seat with a lot of tough games coming up. Green Bay, not an easy matchup. They have been able to dispatch just about everyone they've played outside of the Vikings since Jordan Love has come back. It is not looking easy for this Jags team, a team that is very vulnerable to being attacked down the field through the air. Something we saw get them get taken advantage of a couple of times against them by the Bears in London. we talk about a team that can absolutely have a gunslinger. Jordan Love is absolutely a gunslinger over there. He should have a huge game this week. I think Green Bay wins very easily. They're favored by 4 in this one. They win 41-20, I think. Then we have another game that's not going to be too great as the Tennessee Titans travel to Detroit. Detroit favored by 11. They have just been a buzzsaw all season long, the Detroit Lions have. Tennessee has been a pushover, really. Their one win coming against a very injury-riddled Miami Dolphins team, a Miami Dolphins team that can barely score points without Tua. Maybe that'll change this week when he comes back. But for now, I don't have any faith in this Tennessee Titans team. I think Detroit wins, again, very easily, 34-14. A huge game in the NFC South up next as the Atlanta Falcons travel to Tampa Bay, the second time they've played already in the first half of the season. This is a must-win for Tampa. I know that kind of sucks with the situation they are in, but after dropping that first one to Atlanta in overtime after holding a lead, Kirk Cousins passing for 500 yards on a Thursday night, this is a game that Tampa needs to keep pace in the division. Unfortunately, they've just lost all their weapons. Chris Godwin out for the season. Mike Evans out until at least week 11 after their bye. That's 4 weeks without your top 2 weapons. You look at now McMillan and Sterling Shepard and Cade Otton as your biggest weapons. You still have a nice little stable of running backs in Sean Tucker, Bucky Irving, and Rashad White that can play receiver. A lot of them have a lot of receiving skills, but still, it's not the most ideal situation for a team whose defense has been pretty easy to get by. I think Atlanta's going to get by due to injury. Unfortunately, it's a must-win for Tampa, though, so anything can happen in an NFC South game. I still think Atlanta wins 31-23. The Arizona Cardinals travel to Miami. Tua Tagovailoa is back, and the Dolphins are favored by 4 points in this one. This one should be really good. We have seen this Miami Dolphins team be just atrocious without Tua. They've barely been able to crack 15 points in any week without Tua. That is not good. They couldn't even get the ball into the hands of their playmakers. Tua should be back. Hopefully that should fix things. I'm not sure if it's going to take a week for him to get into the swing of things, but at least the offense should look competent. The thing I'm worried about more than this Dolphins offense is their defense. I know that this is not a very good Cardinals team, but this is a Cardinals team that just came off of a very hard-fought Monday Night Football game, and I think this is a Cardinals team that I think that will give them a lot more trouble than they're expecting down in Miami. I think the Cardinals come in and upset the Dolphins 33-30 in this one. An AFC North matchup up next as the Baltimore Ravens, a team that has looked like the best team in football over the last 5 weeks, winning 5 straight, travel to Cleveland with Jameis Winston now the starter for the first time this year after Deshaun Watson goes down with an Achilles injury in Week 7. The Baltimore Ravens have just been a wagon, a juggernaut all season long outside of the first 2 seasons. The first 2 games. They've won 5 straight games, and it doesn't look like it's stopping now. 4 straight offensive players of the week. Lamar Jackson might win his 2nd straight MVP, and with his running mate in Derrick Henry, they seem unstoppable right now, and I don't think the Browns have the personnel, especially defensively, to slow them down at all. Maybe they put up a little more of a fight on the offensive side of the ball, but I don't think they're going to be able to have the firepower to keep up with the Ravens. Ravens win this one 40-21. Indianapolis travels to Houston, another rematch, this time of Week 1. The Houston Texans have looked really good, especially with Joe Mixon on the field. CJ Stroud, coming off of his worst game as a pro, still plays a really competitive game against a good Green Bay Packers team. They aren't able to get away with a win in that one, but I don't expect CJ Stroud to do that 2 games in a row. He should bounce back in a big way. Indianapolis's defense has been awful, especially against the run, so expect a very heavy diet of Joe Mixon in this one, and I think it's going to go very similar to the way it went in Week 1, with Houston winning in a game that's high-flying and exciting, 30-23. The Saints travel to LA to take on the Chargers on Sunday. New Orleans coming off of a brutal week last couple of weeks. They don't have really any of their weapons offensively. They don't even have their quarterback. Spencer Rattler gets another chance to start. The Chargers come in off of a game that if I had to put in the dictionary as a Chargers game, it would be against the Cardinals on Monday night. Justin Herbert plays really good football, but they can't get anything done. They can't get in the end zone, and they lose on a walk-off field goal. That sounds like a Chargers game if I have ever seen one. I think they get a win in this one against a really beat-up Saints team. They're just going to run it down their throats. We saw that be their weakness the last couple of weeks. I don't think that changes now. The Saints, I don't think they stand much of a chance. But with the kind of ball control offense that the Chargers play, I think it won't be a blowout. I think the Chargers win 18-24. The Buffalo Bills travel to Seattle to take on the Seahawks this Sunday. Buffalo favored by 3 in this one. This should be a lot of fun. We saw Josh Allen have one of his better games in recent memory with the addition of Amari Cooper. I don't expect that to change. Seattle also had one of its better games. We saw them get back on the way they needed to play defensively against a Falcons unit that had been on a roll on offense. They shut them down. They just make a big trade for Ernest Jones to add to the linebacker core. That should pay dividends for them, maybe even immediately. This should be a fun game, especially if the Seahawks are able to play the way they are, like they were last week. They do not have DK Metcalf for this week, most likely, and that is going to hurt, but he's not going to be out for too long. I think with the absence of DK, the Bills, are going to be able to take this one, but it is going to be a lot closer than people think. Should be a fun one. I think the Bills win 31-28. The Chicago Bears travel to Washington in a game that should be, at least on paper, would have been a lot of fun. It doesn't sound like Jaden Daniels is going to play, and I think that's the biggest question mark for this one. He's listed as questionable right now. The coaching staff said he played, but he wasn't there for the viewable portion of practice, so I'm not sure what that means. I'm not super optimistic on him being able to play against Caleb Williams, which would suck because that's the matchup that's been circled on a lot of people's calendars for a very long time. This is going to be a massive game if he's able to go for the Rookie of the Year race. Caleb Williams continues to get better. That Bears defense is one of the best in the league. Even if he is able to go, I think I lean towards the Bears because the Washington defense just is not all that. If he's able to go, I think this is a close one, but I'm going off the assumption that he's not playing, and it's Marcus Mariota back there, who looked good against the Panthers, but I don't think he can do it 2 weeks in a row, especially against a good Bears defense. The Bears win 38-24. The Carolina Panthers travel to Denver, a Denver team whose defense has been quietly one of, if not the best defense in the league. They didn't have Pat Surtain the last couple of weeks, but it didn't matter. Their run defense and everyone else really has stepped up in a huge way, and I don't think that stops against now the Bryce Young-led Panthers. Bryce Young-led Panthers that don't have any weapons. They can really key in on the run here. Maybe this is a big game for Xavier Legette, but I'm not leaving anything on the Panthers in this one. The Broncos win 28-10. The defending two-time Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs travel to Vegas in one of the final games of the week. They take on the Raiders without Aiden O'Connell. Now, the emergency quarterback is, of course, Desmond Ridder. Not that that means anything for the Raiders. They're still not a very good team, especially defensively. They have Max Crosby. That's about it. Although this is a team that the Raiders really do get up for. They seem to really not like the Chiefs, and they're pretty banged up. They add DeAndre Hopkins, and I think that's going to be the biggest thing that pushes them over the top. He might score a touchdown in this one. It should be a lot of fun. I'm taking the Kansas City Chiefs to win pretty easily, 31-15. The Sunday night game. A game that on paper at the beginning of the season looked like one of the best all season as the Dallas Cowboys travel to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. It doesn't sound like one of those games anymore. The Dallas Cowboys have been very disappointing, not being able to play really any defense all season long. And the 49ers just have been struggling. They've got a lot of injuries, and that doesn't change now. Both Debo and George Kittle are questionable. Juwan Jennings already ruled out. Not sure what's going on with Jordan Mason. This is a must-win game for both of these teams. Both of these teams are falling behind in their divisions, and they need this one badly. I think at home, San Francisco is going to be able to gash a defense that just is playing a lot worse than San Fran's, and I think that's the difference here. I think San Francisco takes this one 33-20. And that takes us to our Monday night game, our final game of the week. The New York Giants travel to Pittsburgh to take on Russell Wilson and the Steelers. We'll go into more detail on this one on Monday, but when we preview the game. But for now, just some cliff notes for you. The Steelers played their best game of football, their best overall game of football last week. There's no reason for me to think against the Giants team that while, yes, their defense has been solid, the offense has been unable to get anything done. They won't be able to play good football again. I think the Steelers win this one, again, pretty easily, 30-13. But let me know what you think of any of these games. Thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Have a great weekend. I will see you back here, same time, same place on Monday. Enjoy the weekend of sports. The World Series kicks off tonight. Should be an awesome series as well. Again, Dodgers in 7 for me. I'll see you guys on Monday to break down that and much more from the weekend. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn it.